This conference will now be recorded.
If I get that off my screen now so I can see what I'm doing here.
All right, we're gonna get started here. This is our second webinar, and Bob, we're just gonna get right into it.
Okay, so we go in this camera here.
We're all ready for you, Bob, so we can get started.
Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to our second webinar tonight. I hope it turns out to be a little better than last week technically. I want to start by making sure you've probably seen the handouts we've sent out. So the first thing I'm going to do is flip over to my document camera and make sure that you have the learning objectives for tonight's session. Hope you've had a chance to do that. I hope they turn out to be useful for you, just sort of as a checklist that you understand what we've been doing. And let me focus this. And we'll be sending out another one for next week so that you can, as you're doing the pre-reads, take a look at these and see if you can say you've achieved some of them already. And after the seminar tonight or the webinar tonight, you can check again to see they've been done. You also should have a handout that looks like this. Just keep that on at the handy for a little while. When we start to talk about a little later on effective playing length corrections caused by layups and dogleg holes, they are a little complicated, and I found this way of teaching it makes it a little easier. May not be the way you don't use these on the golf course when you're actually doing it, but just to understand them for the first time, I think you'll find this useful. So let's get started. I want to go back to something we looked at last week, and this is the so-called slope graph that I developed for you. This is the final version. Let me just reduce the size a bit so you can see everything. And what I want to talk about tonight is this issue right in here. I remember I made a point last week of saying scratch course rating. Knuth and his committee determined that it probably had two components to it. That is the score that the scratch player averages on his best half rounds. Some of those strokes are assigned to covering the yardage of the course, and the rest come from having to overcome obstacles that he sees along the way, or she sees. And the same thing is true for the bogey course rating. A much bigger number, but also still has a yardage component and an obstacle value component. The difference being that the obstacle value component for the bogey golfer is a higher percentage of the total course rating than the scratch golfer's obstacle stroke value is. And it's so, the course rating is so dependent on yardage that it's absolutely of paramount importance that we put all of our efforts into getting this right. And that's why I spent a fair amount of time last week, if we remember, talking about how holes have to be measured according to the Golf Canada recommendation. And also we took a look on the Google Earth Pro at some sample holes, and I showed you how they would probably be measured from the middle of the tee deck and whatnot. The focus of tonight's webinar is going to be to enhance your understanding of this scratch yardage rating and the bogey yardage rating by introducing the notion that there's a difference between the measured yardage and the effective playing yardage on a hole. There are a number of things. If you've done the pre-reads, you realize there are 5 things that we have to take into consideration that can and may affect the actual playing length of the hole in a way that it differs from the measured length. So those are the things we're going to be looking at tonight, and I'm going to do them sort of out of order. I'm going to start with the simplest ones and work up to the ones that I think are the most sophisticated, because I want to spend more time on them. They're the ones that people seem to have the most difficulty with. So the first one I want to talk about is the impact of wind. I need to just get, so you can see the whole thing here. This page from the guide, so if you happen to guide open, you can be looking at that page as well, but I've got it on here. We've changed the way we deal with prevailing winds and their impact on scoring 4 times in the 17 or 18 years that I've been doing this. I like the way we do now because there's nothing for us to do really. And the way we do it now is we concede the fact that the wind increases the effect of all obstacles. Even playing downwind is more difficult than playing in no wind. Playing upwind, of course, makes it more difficult to achieve the normal shot length. We used to sort of try to adjust shot lengths on wind, whether it was upwind, downwind, or crosswind, and there used to be a 30-degree rule that prevailing wind had to be within 30 degrees of upwind direction and be considered as upwind or downwind. It got so complicated that very few people were happy with it and really didn't do it very much. So the onus has been taken off the raters now. The wind, there's an adjustment made for wind, and because wind makes the course more difficult, the adjustment is quantized as an increase in effective playing length. It's a sort of a lump sum addition to the playing length. And it's based on the average daily wind at the times when golf is played. So that would be the active season during the daylight hours. And Buddy at some point has to sit down and figure what these are out, what these are for the whole of Ontario, the region of Ontario. And that falls to the that there aren't many courses around Ontario where wind is such a prevailing factor that makes that much of a difference. That's the same for other parts of the world. But if you take a look at how you do it, what you're supposed to do is make an adjustment. Well, you're certainly allowed to make an adjustment for just 9 holes. This would be the case of, I'm trying to think of a course, maybe Pebble Beach would be one where if you've ever played Pebble Beach, you'll notice there are about 9 holes that are out exposed to the coastline and firm winds, but there's 9 holes that are also kind of sheltered. And so you might be able to make an argument on a course like that for making the 9-hole adjustment, but not the 18-hole adjustment. Whereas if it was a course that was the whole 18 holes were exposed to the wind, then you would make the 18-hole adjustment. So there's really not much to do for us except when we send our data in, when we enter our data, we leave it to a hierarchy to, well, this is we're in, okay? So just knowledge of that one's all you really need to know. The next one is altitude, and altitude is sort of in the same category. I'll tell a story about this. I used to say to people, don't worry about it. We don't have any golf courses in Ontario that are over 2,000 feet, so you won't have to encounter this. But for the last 2 summers, I've been invited to go out to Alberta and participate in course rating instruction for their course raters out there. And in doing so, I've actually had to go to courses and rate courses that are at altitudes that fall within this table. So I learned a little bit about it. And you look at how they do this. I just think you should have a bit of a knowledge of this. Altitude has to reduce the playing length of the course. You'll find it's easier to play at altitude because you hit the ball further. It's that simple. And therefore, when you get to your approach shot on a hole, the approach shot is shorter. You'll be hitting it with a deeper faced iron than you would in Ontario's altitude. And that deeper faced iron will have a smaller scatter pattern than the iron you would be hitting it with in Ontario. Therefore, you'll be closer to the pin and you'll probably score better. So they make a gross correction to a gross reduction in the effective playing length. And the reason they do that is because of the fact that full shots go further at altitude. And this little table will give you an example of that. I'll show you a chance to look at it. Under 2,000 feet, of course, the top column here, this top column is the one that we use in Ontario. Now, it doesn't just change from 50 to 270, at 257 at 1,999 feet above sea level. Obviously, it's a gradual increase in length as you get to higher altitudes. It's just felt that until you get to 2,000 feet, it's not a big enough difference to worry about. So when you're above 2,000 feet, though, you notice tee shots for the scratch player, instead of traveling an average of 250, they travel an average of 257. And second shots, let me get by second shots. Instead of going 470 in two shots, the scratch male golfer goes 487 in two shots. And of course, when you get up to higher altitudes, it's even a more significant difference. You can go 505 and 6 yards in two shots at 5,500 feet of altitude. So, and then the same types of corrections are for the male bogey golfer. His full shot lengths are corrected, and same for the female scratch golfer. No correction for the female bogey golfer. It was felt that the female bogey golfer doesn't get the ball in there enough. How can I say this without offending a female bogey golfer? But for the thin air and the lack of air resistance, or the air resistance, to make a significant effect. So the only thing this makes it difficult is when you're rating at altitude, you don't have the nice simple numbers to work with, like 250. So if you had a 400-yard hole, you'd always know in Ontario the scratch player has 150 yards shot in. But if you were in Calgary here at 3,500 feet, you'd be taking 262 off that 400 yards. So the subtraction becomes a lot more difficult on 38 yards shot in. And just not to spend too much more time on this, I want to just go to this section down here. So the correction by which they reduce the effective, this is sort of a global correction they make, is the length of the scratch golfer. So that's 250. If you can see that, 250 times the number of par 4 and 5 holes. That's where you're hitting full shots off the tee. And interestingly enough, we did the in Calgary called Canyon Meadows, and lovely course, but they didn't have 14 par 4s and 5s. They had 5 par 3s and 5 par 5s. So they only had 13 holes where full tee shots are hit. And in fact, on one of them, the scratch male had to lay up it with bare dog legs. So for that course that we worked at, it would be times 12 holes. 12 holes where full shots were played. And then you multiply that by 0.07. Don't know where that comes from. It's probably some sort of curve fitting or empirical data. And then you multiply that by the course altitude, which in Calgary was 3,500 feet over 5,000. So I'm not going to do this calculation, or maybe I could just for fun. So if you go 250, I've got a calculator here, 250 times 12 holes times 0.07 times 3,500 divided by 5,000. You get 147 yards. So they are saying that the effect of this altitude is that the course will play as if it's 147 yards shorter. One thing I meant to mention to you last week that I can go back and mention it now is when we were talking about the scratch yardage rating, it turns out that that 1.0 on the course rating is equivalent to 220 yards of length. So if you increase the length of the golf course by 220 yards by putting in back tees, disregarding any effective obstacles, the course rating would go up by +1. Whereas over on the bogey side here, it only takes 160 yards of length to increase it by 1. So that 147 yards in Calgary would decrease the course rating for that course if it were in Ontario by 147 over 220, or excuse me, 220 over 147, no, the other way around, 147 over 220. Here it would be 147 over 160. Okay, so you get a much bigger number here, and it would affect the slope. The slope would come down by a bigger number. So let's leave that though, because those are the two that we really don't want to spend a whole lot of time. The first one that you're going to be responsible for when you're rating is, I'm going to just make some notes here and then you can sort of see what I'm going to be, is hole elevation. Oh, yeah, bring it down a bit. Yep. This elevation. Can you see that now yet? Got to go lower more. Okay, there we are. Okay, so hole elevation, the elevation of every hole. So at some point in the rating process, you have to measure the elevation change of the hole. It's sort of a given, logical given that downhill holes play shorter and uphill holes play longer. And so you need to measure the hole elevation on every hole. So if you have a tee here and you've got a green down here, somehow you have to come up with a measurement, and this is a horizontal line. You have to come up with that measurement in feet. And how do you do that? Well, we stand here and we have a device which looks like this little surveyor's level. It's uncalibrated, that's the problem with it. But when you hold that and look across with it, you'll be able to tell that it's level, a bubble inside, and you'll see something on the horizon over here. And somehow you have to figure the distance between that thing you see on the horizon and the level of the green, and to the nearest 10 feet. You also have to remember to take off this distance right here, about 5 feet up to your eyes, because it's from the level from your feet down to the level of the green that you want. So this would be a typical downhill hole. As it turns out, it doesn't really matter what the intervening terrain is. You could even sort of have a hole that goes way down here and then comes back up like that. Makes no difference. It's just the gross difference in elevation between the tee and the green. And the opposite of this, of course, is when the green is elevated up here. And these kinds of holes, when you're playing uphill, have a positive hole elevation, and the ones when you're playing downhill have a negative hole elevation. So it's a simple matter then of determining that for every tee on every hole. So if you've got 4 tees that you're dealing with on the hole, you're going to have 72 measurements of hole elevation for that rating. And just because you're not going to be rating one of the tees, remember last week I talked about you could replicate the obstacle values for any tee that's within 25 yards of another. Just because you're not necessarily measuring the obstacle values on that tee, you still want an accurate value of the elevation change for that tee. Now, the good thing about it is if there's no course changes, these things don't change over time. These kind of global data that remains the same. So we rate courses on an 8 to 10 year rotation if we can, and as long as you've got the data from the previous rating, as long as you can verify with the club that the tee deck hasn't changed location and the green hasn't been rebuilt and changed its elevation, then you're probably able to safely use that data from the last time. So one other little thing before we leave this. So you'll be expected to enter on the Form 1, and I'll show you this later on tonight how you do this, what the elevation is for each hole from each tee to the nearest 10 feet. So from 0 to 10 feet, it's 0. We don't bother dealing with elevation changes of less than 10 feet. The theory behind that is there'll be holes every, first of all, the difference in yardage is not that big a deal for under 10 feet. And the other argument would be that throughout the 18 holes, there's probably going to be quite a few holes that are just a little bit uphill and others just a little bit downhill. So when you take the net effect of them all, because that's what happens at the end of all of this, that these are all aggregated and the total elevation change as an algebraic sum for the course is calculated. So it's assumed that it's a waste of time to worry about elevation changes less than 10 feet. 10 to 14 are rounded down, 10 to 14 are rounded down to 10, 15 to 24 become 20, and 25 to 34, you can see the pattern becomes 30. So the usual rules rounding, that 4s are rounded down, 5s are rounded up, applies in this case. The only difference you have to keep in mind is that there is no limit to the elevation change for par 4s and par 5 holes. There's a hole I rate every 4, 5, 8 years, I guess, at Big One Island that has the biggest elevation change I think I've ever seen on a par 4 hole. I think it's about 100 feet, minus 100 feet. It's like hitting a ball down a mountain. But there is a limit, a maximum on a par 3 of plus or minus 40 feet. So if there are any questions about this, we can deal with them later, but this is pretty routine. It's just a matter of developing the skill for measuring these things. I'm pretty good with this level up to about 20 feet or 20. By about 30 feet, I'm beginning to question my ability to estimate. They say you can use the flag stick as an estimator. It's 7 feet tall, so if it was 3 flags down, it would be 21 feet. So you'd round that to 20. But after you get above 30 or so, it's pretty hard to imagine flag sticks stacked on top of each other and how many there would be. And so I've started to use Google Earth Pro for high elevation changes, and I'll show you that a little later on in the hour when we get to use Google Earth Pro. So there shouldn't be too much of a problem with this, I guess. That's pretty much all I wanted to say. Oh, I know what I want to tell you. So these are the numbers that you put on the Form 1. So how do these things get converted into a effective playing length? These aren't playing lengths, these are feet of elevation, and the conversion factor is 2.3 yards per 10 feet. So a hole that's 10 feet uphill plays 2.3 yards longer. A hole that's 20 feet uphill plays 4.6 yards longer, and so on. So that's done in the software. You don't have to worry about that. It's just good that you know that. It's not a huge difference. But if you got a hole that's 60 feet downhill, then you're getting up to 12, 15 yards or so of playing length difference, and that'll be at least a club difference in the shot. And so it's worth making note of that. Okay, so that's a simple one. Sorry, what do you mean?
Par 4s and 50 max?
No max on par 4s and 5s, any max at all. Okay, the next one is roll. I want to do a couple of things here. And I got a good question from Bill King earlier about an error in the answers in the workbook that we sent out, and he's right, it's an error. Question 4C has the wrong answer. And the reason it has the wrong answer is because we didn't update it. We wrote this manual back in 14 or so when we were on our previous edition of the guide, and the previous edition of the guide had a different roll table than this one. And the answer that we gave would have been correct based on that roll table, but it's really not based on this roll table. This is the one we're now using, and what the roll rating is a measure of whether or not you're getting the amount of roll that is average on full shots only. So roll ratings only applied on full shots, but they have to be evaluated for every full shot. So what full shots do you hit? You hit a full shot off the tee if you can, and on some holes you hit a full shot off the fairway. If you lay up off the tee, you don't worry about the tee shot, the roll rating table. So it just applies to the tee shot. That's the important thing. It's the tee shot roll rating table. And it is very simple. These tables that we use are always sort of try to the most vanilla situation. And so this is a full tee shot to a level landing area of average firmness. So level is the simplest situation you can be in, and average firmness is the simplest situation. It's not a very hard fairway that doesn't get irrigation, or it's not a very low-lying soft fairway where the ball's plugged and everything. This is a vanilla situation. So you have to, on every full shot, which would normally be your tee shot on a par 4 or a par 5, you have to determine a roll rating for that shot. So I've developed a little graphic here that I just want to show you. And why am I not getting the whole thing in here? Just let me cut down the magnificent zoom here. Here, that's better. Okay, here we are. So this little graphic, and it's sort of relating the three things. So the amount of roll on a full shot is in the first line what you see in the table. A level landing zone, perfectly level, and you get 15 to 25 yards of roll, the normal amount of roll, and therefore the roll rating is 0. If you look in the table, the next three are the three negative roll ratings. And the reason these are negative is because they reduce the effective playing length of the hole. And so this is meant to represent a gentle downward swing landing zone, which then would suggest you get a little more roll, say from 20, 30 yards of roll. And then the second one, a slightly more steeper, moderate amount of fairway slope. So you get a little more roll from 25 to 35. And the third one that the table handles is, I wouldn't call that steep, but a little significantly more slope. And you get from 35 to 40 yards of roll. And I know the objective of the course rating system should be to make this as objective as possible, but this is where you have to introduce a little bit of your own judgment as a golfer. You have to learn, well, how much slope corresponds to an increase of 5 yards of roll, and how much corresponds to an increase of 10 yards, and how much corresponds to an increase of 15 yards. And it's just something that you get used to. The more you do it, the more comfortable you get with it. Over on this side of the graphic, we have the situations where you're hitting into upslopes, a gentle upslope. You're going to lose some from 10 to 20, an average of 15. And for a slightly steeper, moderate amount of slope, you get +2 is the roll rating, because you get even less roll from 5 to 15. And you can even get situations where you hit into such a significant upslope that you don't get any roll. There was a famous hole at Port Carling Golf Club, the 4th hole, that was like that. It was like hitting a ball inside of the mountain. And if you were lucky, if it went backwards, it was so bad that they had to spend a huge amount of money and redesign the entire hole. But that was the only one I've ever seen like that. So if you look at this, it's fairly easy to assume that it looks like 1 point of roll rating is associated with about 5 yards of roll. So if you get 5 of extra roll, you're going to be shortening the length hole by 5 yards, and your roll rating would be -1, and so on down through the chart. Just out of interest's sake, this is the number that you don't worry about the actual amount of yardage of roll you got. This is the number that you will be entering on the Form 1. And later on, Form 1, the conversion factor is 1 roll doesn't convert to 5 yards of roll. Strangely enough, it converts to 3.5 yards of effective playing length. I've heard explanations for why that is, and has to do with that it's just not a one-to-one correlation between the amount of roll and the impact of that extra roll or roll that you don't get on scoring. But it's a hard argument to make, and it's a hard argument to understand. But later on, all the roll points for the whole course will be added up and converted to effective playing length corrections based on 3.5 yards. And they're added up algebraically. Some are minus, some are plus, but you'll get a sort of roll rating for the entire course at some point in the calculation. So let's go back to so that takes care of the tee shot. This is the big change here. Can you see that? There's a little glare on that. Let me try and turn my, there we go. Maybe I'll just take the light off so you don't get the glare from the light. And so that's the important thing to realize. This table only refers to the tee shot. And so the maximum roll you can get on a tee shot is 3 + 3 or -3. They're the maximum values. However, there are some adjustments. The first adjustment is an E adjustment, and it applies to the tee shot as well. And that is, it takes care of two situations: soft, extremely soft fairways or steeper fairway conditions than the table deals with. And so you could have, if it was soft fairway and extra steep, you could have another increase of 2 or a decrease of 2. So just by using that, you don't run into this very often, but just by using that adjustment, you can get up to -5 on the slope, just on the tee shot. And that's where this roll rating table differs from the previous version, because the previous version, you could only get up to 4 on the tee shot, or -4. And then the second adjustment, this is the hardest one, and Bill asked me a question about this before we started today. And here's the situation: that the adjustment is meant to deal with additional roll issues after the first shot. So if you have 2 full shots on a hole, then you are required to take a look at the roll that you get on the second shot. And if it's less than you would normally expect, in other words, less than 15 to 25 yards, then it's a +1 adjustment to whatever your table value is. Makes sense, because whatever yardage you gain or lose on the tee shot is still subject to whether you get normal yardage in your second shot. And this, of course, is where you get more yardage, more roll on the second shot. Here's the part that doesn't make as much sense, and that is if you've got 3 roll ratings on the hole. In other words, it's a long hole. This would happen to the bogey golfer frequently. Have to hit 3 full shots if the hole's greater than 540 yards. He'll have 3 full shots. Don't adjust the second full shot and the third full shot separately. You adjust them as one unit. So if you've got 2 more full shots to your tee shot, then the normal amount of roll for those 2 shots would be a minimum of 30, 15 on each shot, and a maximum of 50, 25 on each shot. So if you have to evaluate what the sum of the 2 would be, and if it falls within those limits, 30 to 50, then you wouldn't adjust it any further. But if it was less than 30, then you would adjust it down, and if it was greater than 50, you would adjust it up. So you have to consider all of the subsequent shots as if they're one unit. And that's a new issue that has been introduced this time on this version of the guide, and who knows what the next version of the guide that's coming out will do. They've changed the way you evaluate 3 or 4 times over the years. I'm hoping it's not changed much, because this really has been the simple way. Okay, I don't know if there's any more questions than this. Just one of the things you have to remember, though, is every time you come to a fairway landing zone, and that fairway landing zone is the result of a full shot, you've got to make a determination of what the roll situation is. And there's normal roll, whether it's downhill and there's more than normal, or whether it's uphill and there's less than normal roll. And of course, you have to take a look if it's a tee shot, of course, and figure out, well, how much downhill is it and how much uphill is it? So a bit of judgment involved there, but you'll find that you just get used to doing it, really get pretty good at doing it. Okay, that leaves me with 25 minutes to do the good part. So, and this part isn't quite so easy. So I'm gonna use it.
If you have any questions about elevation or roll, just submit it in the chat. We can answer them at the end of the session.
Okay. So what I want to spend the rest of the time on is this whole issue of dog legs and layups. Okay. And these are situations where you would normally be expected to hit a full shot, but due to the circumstances that you find yourself in with relation to obstacles and what on the golf course, you're unable to hit a full shot. So on this graphic here, I've given you a couple of examples, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and take a look at some real holes on Google Earth Pro, and that's what we're going to use, that worksheet that I gave you to do. So here might be a typical example where there is a gully. This is a deep ravine full of underbrush. It now qualifies as a penalty area under the new rules, but because you'd be unlikely to be able to find your ball in there, and if you did find it, you'd be very unlikely to be able to play it. And so the question is, how does that affect the playing length of this hole, if it does? And I guess the whole issue is whether you can hit it far enough to clear this obstacle. And the USGA procedure, you must be able to hit it far enough to clear the obstacle on the fly by 10 yards. This is called the safe carry position, the safe carry point. If you simply can't do that, then you're expected to lay up 10 yards behind the obstacle. And the question is, why would you lay up by 10, and why would you have to clear it by 10? And the answer is my favorite topic, the scatter pattern. The last thing you want to be able to do when you're trying to clear an obstacle is to hit one at the bottom of the scatter pattern. You remember the scatter pattern for a driver was 250 for scratch, but some of the shots went as far as 260 and some of them went as short as 240. So you don't want to hit that 240 when you're trying to clear this obstacle. So to protect yourself against that, you have to be able to clear it by 10 yards. And the other is true. The last time you want to flush one is when you're trying to lay, and that's the time you hit it right in the middle of the club and it goes 10 yards further than you're expecting to hit it, and you're in the obstacle anyway. So that's those distances. So that's a pretty common issue. Sorry, this is a pretty common thing that happens. I'm going to show you some examples where this is not necessarily just a ravine. It can be a river. Now they're lumped together as penalty areas anyway. Sometimes they're fairly close. Sometimes they're way out here. Sometimes these things start right here, and there is no place to lay behind them. And so that's a whole nother issue. We're going to do that in our very last webinar. That's called, it's usually the bogey player that finds himself in that position, and that's called bogey can't play the hole. But since we need to have a bogey course rating, we have to define a way to let the bogey play the hole. A second common situation is where you're fine off the tee, but you come to a point, usually when there's a water hazard or a ravine, more often a water hazard, fronting the green. And you have to be able to carry that water hazard forever. You could be hitting from here and it's no problem, but you also could be hitting from way back here where it does become an issue, but the criteria are the same. You have to be able to carry it by 10 yards. So you have to get 10 yards past the far margin, be able to get 10 yards past the far margin of the head penalty area. Or if you can't, you have to lay it up 10 yards behind the penalty area. And the two holes I'm going to look at is the 12th hole at Scarborough Golf Club. In a minute, I'm going to put them on the overhead, or the Google Earth Pro. I think you'll find it very, very helpful. And the second hole at Whittington Lakes Golf Club. These are holes that I've been done recently, and they're some examples of that. The other thing I'm going to show you is that takes care of the carrying situation. Here's the second situation that is lumped together because it's sort of the same thing, and that is a dogleg hole. And on this dogleg hole, you're expected to follow the line of play because the obstacles on the inside, the tall trees or whatever, you can't really cut across the corner very much. And the problem usually is a problem for the scratch player, and it depends on how far it is out to the elbow here. And this is this example would be 220 yards out to the elbow. So the scratch player hits a full tee shot of 250, And once again, as I say, that for rating purpose, both golfers are expected to hit the ball on the lineup. There's none of this trying to hook it around the corner or fade it around the corner. That may be how you play it, but for rating purposes, you're expected to play it along the line of play with a straight shot. So the scratch player can't hit it 250. The scratch player just has to hit it to here. The bogey player probably hits a full tee shot though to here, and then it gets complicated. The scratch player hits from here into the green if he can. If he can't, he's up here, so he just plays the hole straight forward into the green. The bogey player will be expected to do something like this. Will be able to divert from the line of play because it's safe to do that and get back onto the line of play and hopefully be able to do that by hitting a full second shot for him, which is 170. And then we'll have to see how much he has left here to determine how much longer the hole may have played for him. Might even played shorter for him. He's been able to play along the third side of this scalene triangle, which is going to be less than the two that were used probably to measure the hole. So that's what I'm going to do now for the next little while. So if you've got those sheets out, let's try and have some fun with this and see if we can. I can't show you my sheet because I'm going to be converting over to my other, here we are. Thanks, Duncan. So here's the hole I want to consider. This is the 12th hole at Scarborough Golf Club. And it's this is the green. It's a par 4. There are 1, 2, 3, 4 tees on this hole. And the first one I want to look at is tee number 2. So that's just, do this 3. So let's say we're playing from this tee right here. And the first thing I need to know is what's the measured length of this hole. So I could look at the Scarborough database, but I'm not going to. Probably be measured in close to a straight line. Probably, maybe not. Maybe you'd come pretty close to these trees if you went in a straight line. So Duncan would be better telling you this, but that's probably a pretty good estimate of the measured length of the hole. So on your sheet that you have, I've got 4 holes that we can use on this sheet. On the top one, let's say the measured hole length, this is Scarborough number 12, is 365 yards. Now I'm just doing this approximately, so I can spend all day trying to get that at 365, but there's no point. So that's the measured length of the hole. So now what I want to do is go back, okay, how is each of our 4 golfers going to play this hole? So I'll start with the scratch player, scratch male. So you remember the scratch male hits at 250 yards, but it's not the 250 yards that's going to be the defining issue here. It's how far he carries it. And if you'll remember, he carries it 230 of those 250 yards and then rolls at 20. So let's stick him out here somewhere. So there's 223 yards of carry. So he's going to land right about there. Okay, can you see up in my measuring box? That's about 229.84 yards. That's 230. And then he's going to roll for 20 yards if this is a flat fairway of average firmness. Gets to about there. So as far as he's concerned, just a normal shot. Next week, we're going to talk about the consideration that this shot gets for having to cross these obstacles. But other than the psychological difficulty, there's no difference to him. Might as well not even be there. He just hits this shot up to here. And if it's at 400, what did I say the hole was? 365 yards. And his first shot is 250. So you could write that in on the first line for scratch man, 250. And then his next shot is going to be 115, I presume. Okay? And that's it for him. So he goes to there, and he's got the 365 yards in. So 250 plus 115. Okay, let's go back and see how the bogey male golfer plays it. He starts here. Now, once again, the consideration about how you're going to play this hole depends on how far you can carry it. So let's see, we know how far he carries it. He carries it 180 yards. So he lands about there, 180, somewhere in around there. And he rolls 20 yards and ends up right about there in the water. So obviously he can't hit that shot. And he's forced then to lay up. This is a forced layup. So now the question is, where does he lay up? So I'm going to say there's the margin of the hazard right there at 194 off the tee, about 194, let's say, or 190, yeah, 194. So I'm going to lay him up at 184 off the tee. Okay, so on the line on your graph, on your worksheet that says Bogie Man, write his first shot down as 184. He hits it 184 off the tee. But now he's sort of wide open. He can hit a full second shot, nothing more to cross. He's not going to have trouble crossing this. And how far does he hit his second shot? He hits it 170, right? 150 of carry and 20 of roll. So 184 plus 170 is what, 344?
Yeah.
Is that what it adds up to, 344? So he ends up getting to about there, almost to the green. Okay, so now if he's at 344 and he has to get to, so 170 would be the length of his second shot. Now his third shot to get to a 364 is going to be 20 yards or so. So his shots are 180, what did I say, 184, 170, and 30. Okay, we'll get back to what has made the, so he has, for him, wasn't it? On a normal straightaway hole, he can go 370 yards in 2 shots, and this is a 364-yard hole, so he should be able to reach it in 2, but because of the necessity of laying up here, he can't reach it in 2, so it's pretty obvious that it's made this hole longer for him. Okay, let's go back and now take a look at the bogey, or the scratch lady. She's very similar to the bogey player, so she carries at 190 and is at 20 more, so she gets a total distance of 210. And normally that would sort of get her across, not by 10 yards, but it would start her thinking like she could make it, but she lands at 190. And so she's going to land right there. And if she gets any roll at all, she's in. So she's got the same issue as the scratch player, the bogey man. I mean, he can only hit it, he can hit it 184, I think we said. So put him at 184, 10 yards short of the hazard, and that's where we put her. So her first shot is 184. Now her next shot, she can hit 190. She can fly at 170 and roll at 20 for 190. So if she's 184, she's gone 84 already, and she can go 190 on her second shot, then she can make it from here. She can reach it. Okay, so there's her shot. There's her, she's got her full 364 yards. Okay, but she's had to hit this shot from 184 up to 364, which is 180 yards. Okay, so her shots are 184 plus 180 on the hole. And essentially, she's played it right along the line of play. So you'd wonder how does this make the hole any longer for her? But I'm going to tell you in a minute. Okay, so you've got the 2 shots then for the scratch woman, 184 plus 180. Okay, let's go now finally to the poor bogey lady. So there she goes. So she hits at 150 by carrying at 130 and rolling at 20. So she's fine. She can go to 130 there, and then another 20 yards of roll. She goes out to 150, right about there. No problem. She's got a nice fairway landing zone out there. She's crossed this hazard, but we'll get to that next week. And now her next shot, her full second shot, she hits at 130 by carrying at 110. And so she can, she's hitting from 150, she can carry it up to 260. So let's see where 260 is. So there's 260, wow, there's 260 there. that's where she lands. And she rolls another 20 up to 280. And if she's 280, and this is a 364-yard hole, she's got an 84-yard shot in, right? So her shots are 150, 130, and 84. Okay, so okay, the good question. They said, do we lay up into the rough or would it be better to go to the end of the fairway? Okay, here's the way you handle that, I think. Technically, you lay up into the rough, but if you'd prefer, you can lay up a little bit further back into the fairway, but the amount you'd have to lay, the additional amount you'd have to lay up to get back in the fairway cannot be considered as forced layup. That part is layup by choice then. You're using it as a course management strategy. So you lay up by 10 yards behind the margin of the obstacle. If I put you in the rough and you decide for course management reasons, I know I'm not going to get there in two anyway, either move this back another 10 yards and hit from there, then the net result of that will be you'll have a shot in that's going to be 10 yards longer because you've chosen to hit from 10 yards further back, but you won't get any additional effective playing length on it because the last 10 yards of your layup wasn't a forced layup. Okay, and yeah, okay, that's the same thing. Okay, we're good with that. Same question. So I think we can do this now. If we take a look at the numbers you have written down there, I think I should have one here somewhere that's got them written down too.
Here.
Oh, there it is, sort of. Okay. So the scratch, I don't know, like, here's the one I want. Here's the one I want. So here's on this hole. Now, I guess I got it to 365 when I did it, and you got it to we got it to 364, but the point is the same. So let's take a look at each of these players, how they played the hole. Scratch on a 365-yard hole that's a straightaway normal hole, what approach shot would he be expecting? He'd be expecting a 115-yard approach shot, and that's what he got. So this is the way I always do it. So his effective playing length correction is 0. The presence of those obstacles had no effect on the playing length for him, and you can tell that. He hit this the normal length, and he hit this one the normal length. Okay, let's take a look at the Bogie Player. This is a 365-yard hole, which he normally would hit in 2. Now he has to hit a 12-yard shot, third shot. So there's a couple of ways of looking at this. One is you can look at how much shorter this normal shot, shorter he hit the first shot than he would have if the hadn't been there, and it's 17 yards, right? And the other way of looking at it is how length of hole would he bang? What length of hole would require him to play a 12-yard third shot? Well, if he normally goes 370 and 2, that would be a 182-yard hole, right? So that you can look at it either way. He either hits this shot 17 yards shorter than he normally would, and then he has to go to a third shot that he would have on a hole that's 182 yards long, which is in fact 17 yards longer. So he's made this look like a 182-yard hole by having a 12-yard third shot when it was only a 365-yard hole. So his EPL correction is positive. It's added yardage, and it's added 7 yards to the hole. So far, so good. The scratch lady, she has also hit a shot that's shorter than normal, but in her case, it's 27 yards shorter than normal. And then she's been able to hit whatever shot she needed to get to the green in 2. So there's 2 ways of looking at it. You can say, well, she hit this one 27 yards than she normally would have. Or you could say, what length of hole would she normally have a 182-yard shot into, and that would be a 192-yard hole, right? Because she goes 210 off the tee. So either way, the playing length correction because of the layup, the forced layup, is 27 yards, plus 27. And then finally for the bogey player, this is a normal shot. This is a normal shot. It would be the normal length of her third shot on a 365-yard hole because she goes 280 and 2. So isn't that odd? The best golfer in the group has no effective playing length correct. No, I don't mean the best golfer. That's not fair. The person hits it the furthest has no effective playing length correction. The person hits it the shortest has no playing length correction, but the other two in the middle do. Okay, I think I can show you. This took a lot longer than I thought. My appetite's always too big here, but let's go back to get me back to. I got to get to Whittington Lakes. Maybe I don't have time. Let me try and just show you this one hole on Whittington Lakes. I may have to extend this into next year, but next week a bit, because I wanted to show you some other here. How can I get that? There we go. Whittington Lake Golf Club, there it is. Don't know if you all know this golf club. It's in Tottenham. It's an old course. It's been around a long time, and they just built a new 18-hole course. It's supposed to be a links course, and it's very new, but you could hold a rating clinic on that course. It's got just about everything you'd ever want. So I can't really do the data for you on this, but I'm going to show you the same. If we did the same approach, because we're sort of running out of time, I was going to go at it from this hole. This is the hole. It's a par. That one goes the other way. That's in the back nine. This one, if you can see the decks, there 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 decks, I think. Anyway, I wanted to do it, say, from this deck here, or this deck here. Oops, I cleared my other stuff off. This deck here to the green. And it's 455. That's not the deck I wanted. I wanted this deck. 2. Okay, and maybe you might put this over a little bit here somehow just to get a better line. But anyway, that's the hole. So the question is, these golfers going to play that hole that measures 402 yards long. And so let's go back again and take a look at the scratch player. Well, the scratch player male hits it 230 on the fly and rolls it 20. So there's 274. So he's good. He hits it 250 right to there. And then he hits it another 152, I guess, to go 402. Maybe move that back a bit. So his shots would be 250 plus 402. He doesn't have to lay up from this tee. But suppose we moved him, because we're doing all these tees. Suppose we consider him from this tee. What's happened there? Well, now he flies at 230. So that's 227. So there's 230 and rolls it to 250. And you can see that he's in the drink. Okay, so what do we do with him? We have to lay him up. Where do we lay him up? There's the boundary of the hazard, 241 yards off the tee. So we're going to only let him hit it 231 yards off the tee, right to there. And then his next shot then is going to have to be 231 to 354. That's 123 yards. Now we're at 8 o'clock, so I'll just wrap this one up. From this tee, you see he's got a 120-yard shot into the green. What length of hole does scratch normally have a 123-yard shot into? Well, he hits it 250 off the tee normally, so 123 would be the length of the shot on a 173-yard hole. So for him, this 154-yard hole plays as if it's 373 yards. So his effective playing length correction is plus 20, plus what's that? 20 plus 19 yards. Okay, and we could do the same thing for all the other golfers. We could do Same for the other three, but we're kind of out of time. So I sort of thought this would take more time than it should. So I think what I'll do is next week, we were thinking that doing all the obstacles in webinar 3 might be too ambitious, and we might have to go over to webinar 4 to finish up the obstacle rating. I'd like to just spend about the first 10 minutes of next week taking a look at a different type of layup hole, or a layup hole to start with, and two types. One where you can't cut the corner because of the obstacles on the inside of the layup of the leg, and one where you can cut the corner, and show that if you can cut the corner safely, you can actually shorten the hole and have a negative effective playing length correction on the hole. So I think that's as far as we're going to be able to get tonight. We did actually get to all of them. We just didn't save enough time for to finish the dogleg layup. So we'll come back to that next week, and I think we'll call it then tonight. It's just a couple of minutes past 8, and we really try to stay onto this 7 to 8 o'clock schedule. So, okay.